And we are live with episode 4 of the Think Fitness Life podcast with your hosts, Matt Gluckman and Eric Menchie. And this week we're going to talk about sort of powerful accomplishments with the mind. And a little breakdown of the show. We're going to do our news. We got some emails to read and answer. Then we're going to go into open discussion about some examples of mindset and great human achievements. And then we'll do our closing statements, and then we'll talk about what we're going to go over next week. So, Eric, what you got?
So everyone knows March Madness started, and there was a big upset last night. First time number 16 seed beat a number 1, which I think it kind of ties into this powerful mind kind of set where you have this complete underdog team that has probably no shot at beating this number 1 ranked team, and they take them down. Small team, doesn't get a lot of funding, takes them down, and it's great to see that
underdogs succeed. But I don't really watch March Madness at all, I gotta admit. But
yeah, here and there I watch it, but other than that, I'm not crazy into college basketball.
All right. Well, I found since last week a little article about the Army and how they are changing their physical fitness test. And I thought that was pretty interesting because the other test was 40 years old, and all it was to qualify for the Army was a 2-mile run, a 2 minutes of sit-ups, and a 2 minute of push-up test. So it's pretty standard and pretty basic. And now it's still under development, but the new test is going to have a strength deadlift portion, a heavy ball toss portion, and like a sprint drag carry exercise. So I think that's much more applicable to what they would have to be doing and the physical demands on somebody in the military. And I just think it's pretty cool that, we're changing it up.
Yeah, and they've kind of been implementing this whole, tactical training more and more now in the military rather than the old PT ways of, hey, we're going to run sit-ups, push-ups consistently. Now they're getting more into weight rooms. They're developing strength programs for, these troops, which is great to see. They're just making them overall better. And like you said, more demanding of the job.
Yeah.
Like these movements will help them
why
immensely.
it didn't change is just like, 40 years ago, that generation was more active and took care of themselves, and there wasn't all this BS in the nutrition world. And now fast forward to today, and we talked about this a couple episodes ago that 30%, you brought this fact up, that like 30% of people 17 to 24 in the US are too overweight to serve in the military. And I guarantee that was not the numbers 40 years ago. So it just feels like they have to raise the standard a little bit so that they don't just don't get people who can pass the 2-mile run, pass the sit-ups in under 2 minutes, pass the push-ups in under 2 minutes, but actually aren't physically fit for the demands of the military.
Correct. I tell people, you got to remember this whole exercise kind of strength routine kind of came out of the military years ago when they were trying to rehab soldiers. And this hasn't been around for a long time. So they kind of did what they thought was the best. And now that science is coming out and research shows that these techniques are better, it's great to see that kind of evolve into a more progressive training program. Back after World War II, they weren't doing, heavy weights, and just all that stuff was just being tested on rehab patients of injured, which is awesome to see that.
Yeah, and I talked to a lot of people at my gym, and
in this field.
There's actually quite a few people over like 40 and 50 who are former military personnel and veterans. And they talk about I was actually talking about the tests with them, and they were saying how the stuff that they did in the Army back then, the tests and stuff in boot camp, were much more like mental challenges, like being out in the cold or going for long ruck runs, like right in the middle of the night, or staying up all night to have to clean the cafeteria and then go to PT first thing in the morning. Like all these sort of mental battles to make them stronger and headstrong. And I like how they're also focusing the test on the physical capacity of the um, person as well.
Yeah, and the big thing, like you said, is the mental aspect of it. Because anyone can kind of go lift a weight, get strong, get good at that. Can you do it consistently over time, repetitive, under high stress situations? That's mental toughness. And it's great to see them implement this and kind of program this into basically create a powerful mind for these soldiers. So when they're in combat, they don't have
Well, I
to
was saying
even
that
be
I was
phased
saying that
by those
40 years
stressors coming
ago
at
it
you.
was more just about mindset and not the physical capacity. Where I feel like now they're incorporating also the physical aspect of it. But yeah, let's get into
Right.
emails because we could definitely dive into those for a little bit. I want to spend some time on both the emails that we got, and then still have time for open discussion. So, first email came from Anthony. Thanks for sending an email in. Really appreciate it. And it says, "Hi, Matt and Eric. Thank you for the free entertainment and information. I thought of this question after your first episode, and I'm pretty sure I know what your answer may be after the second episode, but here it goes. 4 years ago, I weighed 360 pounds. With changes in my diet and some intense stretches of cardio, I went down to my high school weight of 185. That's awesome right off the bat. I now stay between 195 and 200. I'm not too worried about my weight. I'm pretty sure I can maintain and control that through my diet. I would like to start using the gym more for fitness, not too interested in bulking up, just health and maintenance. What are some good exercise or resources for getting started again? I find myself going and doing one or two machines and then just migrating towards cardio because I know it's my gym time and has become more sporadic, so I'm a little apprehensive about wasting a trainer's time. Once again, freaking awesome. Such a big journey and a big accomplishment to go from 360 to 185, and that's not easy by any means. So, hats off to you. That's amazing. And my recommendation for places to start would just be try to step away from the machines, get into body weight exercises first, then move into dumbbells, then move into barbells. And I would spend maybe the first couple weeks, first month, just doing lower body exercises, doing working on your single leg movements, your lunge patterns, your step up patterns, your squat patterns, your hinging patterns. Like right there, there's 5 different patterns just for your legs to move properly. Because that's going to help you in just building a better foundation for overall health and your body functioning. And I think that's a great place to start rather than just like throw a bunch of stuff at you all at once and you have so much to focus on. So I would say lower body exercises, maybe also some core work as well, just practicing like planking and stuff like that. And then, don't feel bad about going up to a trainer and just being completely honest, being like, hey, just letting you know my schedule is pretty sporadic. I'm not trying to train consistently or anything like that, but I definitely would utilize you as a resource like once a month as a check-in or once every other week. And just be, upfront about what you're looking for. They're going to be much more, um, you know, understanding of your situation, much more helpful than if you go up and you pretend like you're looking for a trainer.
Totally. And I'd say if you approach that trainer, give them all the information you just gave us, because then they can kind of implement these full body movements and compound lifts that will really help you
That's
kind
a
of
good
break
point.
that plateau or staleness that people get in. And you've come so far right now. Definitely utilize a trainer for that so you can just get experience with some of those lifts, and then you take that, do them on your own, and you're right back on the path that you need to be, and you're not feel like you're just kind of going through the motions of same
Yeah, that's
workout
a really good
cardio,
point
same workout cardio.
too. Like I had a bunch of clients who would just have have a session to learn something, but then apply it and really learn it because you can't really learn something just doing it once. You got that repetition, and then they'd come back a couple weeks later. Hey, I've got this stuff underway. I'm ready for the next step, and it was awesome because they're just self motivated. And Anthony, you're definitely self motivated, so I think you should look into that. That's probably the best thing for you. Need more information or want us to send you a few resources, feel free to email us again. We'll be happy to send you some resources. But thanks again for the email, and hope you're enjoying the show. Next email we have from Jeff. It goes, "Hi, men. In regards to nutrition, knowing how huge it is, can you touch on the aforementioned white versus brown rice topic? I've heard conflicting opinions on brown being an anti-nutrient. Also, are variations in nutrition as critical as variations in workout routines? Does one want to eat certain foods at certain points of the day, some days, and then mix it up others? In that breath, are there days where you should do heavy carb loading versus days when you should be doing more protein heavy? Also, your ideal pre and post workout ideas are always interesting. Best, Jeff." Once again, Jeff, thanks for the email. Really appreciate you reaching out, and I'm glad you're listening to the show. In the short answer, white rice better than brown rice, and definitely want variations in your nutrition routine similar to workout routine. Diving into that a little further, white rice, the big thing about white rice is it acts as a resistant starch. So you actually want to cook your white rice and then let it cool down to room temperature, because that does something with the chemical process to make it to become a resistant starch. And what that does is it acts like a good fiber in your digestive system and actually improves your digestion. And the problem with brown rice is it's rich in lectins, which can cause a lot of issues in digestion. And not only do lectins prevent you from digesting properly, but it can stimulate your body to try to exit the unknown source in the body, and thus now you're not absorbing nutrients from other food that has been in your system. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword. Definitely white versus brown rice. And in terms of variation in nutrition, high-fat diets have a huge benefit in terms of longevity in your health. It's a cleaner fuel source. There are so many cognitive benefits from eating good fats. But the other side of that is you're going to perform better with carbohydrates and glycogen. It's hands down. Like, if you're not going to take an athlete and put them on a ketogenic diet, you're just insane. So days that you are doing like heavy lifting, I'd say those be your heavy carb days. And for example, like I don't lift on the weekends, so I really try to actually not eat that many carbs on the weekends. And another thing to add on top of that and make that variation is intermittent fasting. We talked about this on another podcast, the benefits of autophagy and the other benefits to fasting, getting your immune system to sort of recover itself before it has to work again. I would say a good resource for you, though, would be look up Mark Sisson, Sisson, and the Primal Blueprint. He's got a lot of good resources out there. But yeah, that pretty much, I think I covered all the topics that I came up with that. He had a question about ideal pre and post workout ideas. And I'm a very simplistic person, so I just try to make my pre-workout a meal a couple hours before with some carbohydrates in it. Maybe right before my workout, I might eat like a banana. The only supplements I may take will be like a pure beta alanine or pure citrulline malate form. They're just both salts. One helps vasodilation, and one helps provide resources to your muscle or fuel to your muscle quicker. And then post workout, a meal. Honestly, I mean, it depends what your goals are, but if you're trying to enhance performance or definition, a meal within 2 hours after your workout that contains a good amount of carbohydrates and a good clean protein source, that's you're basically like a sponge that has been squeezed out after your workout, and you want that sponge to absorb good quality fuel they'll prepare you for the next workout.
Nailed it. And I would just say how kind of I approach it, and you mentioned it, is just, lifting days, I'll go higher carbs. And then on maybe conditioning days or metabolic days, I'll do, lower carbs, change that ratio up a little bit. So you have kind of a high-low ratio. And I use that with a lot of my clients that are trying to maybe cut some weight or just kind of lean out body mass or body fat percentage. So that's a good way I look at it. And same thing I do on the weekends. I kind of cut back on carbs, change the ratios a bit.
Yeah.
But you nailed
I
it.
mean, it really is about variability. I mean, once again, Anthony, Jeff, thanks for sending in the emails, and feel free to send in more. And that being said, again, the email is thinkfitnesslife, all one word, at gmail.com. We'll read your emails and answer them live recorded on the podcast. So please send them in. And we'll move on to topic for today was powerful minds. And I had four examples I wanted to talk about. So I'll try to keep them short and sweet and to the point. But basically, and how many did you want to talk about? Cool. We'll just kind of go back and
Just a
forth, and
couple,
you can just
kind of
fill
fill
them in
in with
as they
you.
come to you. So my first one is a guy that I met at my very first gym that I worked at, and it was the most influential person that I met to date. And his name was Kevin. And when I met him, he's doing full body workouts. You know, he didn't look like he had any injury or any limitation in his mobility. And talking to him and learning about his story, this man was in a motor vehicle accident and greatly damaged his spine from his neck down to the point where he was not only quadriplegic, but he was advised by the doctors that he needed to replace his vertebrae with metal vertebrae, or else they were going to collapse on his body and his organs and he was going to die. And he said, no, I don't want to do that because then I have to admit that I'm going to be paralyzed for life. So instead, he sat in the hospital bed, and for a year straight, he said he stared at his fingers until the connections regrew and he was able to wiggle his fingers. And eventually, for that following year, he was wiggling his fingers, he was moving his hand, then he was moving his arm, then he was doing full range motion upper body exercises with his arms. The following year, he did the same things with his toes, stared at them for a year, he said, until the connections would regrow. Well, he said it took him a year for the connections to regrow, and he was able to eventually do full body leg exercises. And it's just amazing. I mean, so many people would take that opportunity to feel sorry for themselves or to quit or to give up, and unfortunately that's like the worst thing you can do at that moment. And at the very beginning, this man made that mental switch in his head of, I'm not going to accept this as my fate, and he changed it.
And that's amazing where you have someone that he could easily have said, I'm done. I'm going to accept my fate and take it as it is and just quit on life. And where would that have got him? And I was going to mention this later, but this story kind of hits me right there is anyone who's read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl knows that if you have a positive outlook on life, you can change your mindset. If you have a negative, you're going to go down the tubes on a path of almost depression. And it's amazing that this guy basically took his mind and said, I'm going to do this, and didn't stop until he accomplished that. I give him all the credit in the world because that is a situation where someone is going to be completely down on their luck. For me, I shouldn't even think about when I have a tough situation, think about even complaining compared to that. That is complete control of the mind, taking a shitty
Hey,
situation and turning it
kind of
for
like what you
good.
said
Great for that guy.
about the Viktor Frankl. A man with a why can endure any how, and he did have children, and I don't know the full details, and I'm trying to get in touch with him through somebody at my old gym, but he did have children. I don't know where in terms of the accident and children related, but I can guarantee that he probably had some motivation for not making the choice to accept his fate as paralyzed. Since it's all actually on the topic, Stephen Hawking, he recently died, and the same type of deal. He was at a young age was told by doctors that he wasn't going to live, and he was really young, so it would have been his parents' choice at the time, but just that perseverance, and look at the amazing things that he has opened up to just humans in general. So yeah, like you said, if if you can associate a why behind the how, pretty much any suffering is endurable.
And that for this guy, it's pretty much if we don't have kind of like control of our body or limbs, we're pretty much useless. But the thing is, he still had his mind, and the mind is more powerful than anything. It takes a lot to break your mindset or some people's mindset if you have that kind of inner strength. And this is a pure case where his inner strength couldn't be broken, and from now on, it won't be broken because anything he looks at as might be a challenge or tough.
Yeah, well, because David Goggins is my next example, and he's the same way. Like nothing will get in his way because of the things that he pushed himself to do when he didn't want to do them, so that he would suffer, but so that he would get the outcome that he wanted. Suffering isn't the outcome. Suffering is the stimulus that will lead you to the outcome, and the outcome is hopefully your goal is outcome is strength and longevity. And yeah, this David Goggins, I mean, his story is so fascinating. If you go on the Joe Rogan podcast, he has an interview with him, and his podcast, Joe Rogan's podcast, are so long that I usually only listen to like 20-30 minutes of them. This was the first one. I listened to the whole thing. David Goggins tells his story, and I won't be able to tell it nearly half as good the way he does, but I just want to briefly touch on it. And this man was, I want to say he said he was like 297 pounds at his heaviest. And he knew he was working as an exterminator or something like that. And he knew he had to change his life. And he wanted to qualify for the army. He wanted to be the baddest in the world because he knew that making that goal would change his life, and he would push himself out of his comfort zone. He even talked about he was just kind of like a normal guy. He was nothing special. And he said the first time he went running, this guy's 297 pounds. He jogged a quarter mile, had to stop, turn around, walk home, cried, had a milkshake, and then he put on Rocky. He didn't stop there. He didn't quit. He knew that he had to eventually get to this goal of being able to run and qualify for the army. And long story short, he ended up having to do a 100-mile run. Again, long story short, go check out his podcast. It's such a great story. Long story short, he completed it, but he didn't do it in 24 hours, so he didn't really qualify. But he didn't stop there. And not only was his body so sore after running 100 miles in 19 hours, despite never having even run a marathon before, he then later went and did a marathon with his family, like a couple months later or something. And like just that, not only the mindset part of him having that will to suffer and that will to challenge and strengthen himself, but that mindset of that perspective change, because he went and ran a marathon of 26 miles after he had ran 100 miles in 19 hours. So he's like, 26 miles? That's nothing. I'll do that all the time. And then this guy became an ultra marathoner, and he's done like 24-hour runs, and I think I don't know his longest run ever, but I'm looking on here and I got 135 miler, but just
This is
nuts.
something like,
Yeah, it's just
yeah,
nuts. With the
it's like the
again, the
backwater.
strong mindset is a cool topic, but then the fact that his perspective is just so different because of sort of the hard things he's done early on.
And I think what you see is with these two examples is they're completely different, but both people were almost at a low of a low mentally in a point in their life where they say, hey, I have to change me. I don't have to change people around me. I don't have to change, the world. I have to change me first. Then I can start changing other people. And Goggins will say he didn't like running. He didn't like doing any of that, but he found that kind of suffering and doing what you don't like and uncomfortableness built his willpower and built his mindset that said, I can do this. And I think that's where people need to kind of start to look at themselves and say, okay, where have I been lowest of low in my life? How did I approach that situation? Did it make me better, or did I let it make me worse? And for those people going forward, every time you look at a terrible situation, figure a way to make it better. Figure a way to get past it, learn from it, and say, how is this going to make me stronger? Because if you surpass any of that stuff, you will be stronger. And that's what Goggins says is now he approaches things as this is going to challenge me mentally, physically, this is going to make me stronger. I want to do this. I want to be stronger. And I think that is great. And he continues to do that to this day. What's the next biggest challenge for me? And it doesn't have to be running marathons or something crazy. Like we've mentioned before, just go out, find something challenging for yourself that gets you out of your comfort
Eh,
zone, or, that you don't like do, and go do it. And that's where I kind of tell my clients, how I use exercise. And I know we kind of mentioned this in the beginning with the military is, yeah, we're creating a system to run and be efficient, but I'm also basically telling your mind, I'm going to make it uncomfortable for the next hour. What you do to kind of learn to deal with it will change you. Every time I see you, I'm going to throw more stuff at you or different stuff at you. How are you going to react and be stronger and better? And
yeah,
I
and I think
will
the
say it's going to
greatest
help your
thing
mindset.
that I learned from David Goggins and that I want to share with everybody is that it is possible, no matter what you think, or your past experiences, whatever. Like, I think that's the hardest thing for people to overcome, is that they they don't realize it, but their mind's their quickest thing to quit, and their mind will sort of convince them or justify why they can't do something, or why they are okay with being complacent with where they are now. And he even talks about all this stuff. Like, he's not special. He graduated with a 1.6 GPA. He's got sickle cell anemia. He had congenital heart defect, and he had a hole in his heart. I mean, this man had so many physical ailments, but he just kept pushing, and he quit so many times along the way. He failed so many times along the way. He had to go through 3 hell weeks. He had to stop some runs. He has the world record for the most amount of pull-ups in 24 hours, and he failed 2 times before he broke the record. So he talks about that, about how you just can't be afraid of these failures. You can't be afraid of these sufferings. That they're just part of it. And the more you can just push through, you're going to be better on the other end. And that's what's powerful about it. Is I think so many people have this mindset that they have to be amazing at something and great at something, and they become this. They're afraid to fail, and I blame sort of the way that our culture has been raised. Is everybody's got to be a winner. Everyone gets a participation trophy, and you look at people like Vince Young. He went and he's an amazing quarterback, and he got booed once in an NFL game, and it messed with his psyche so bad that he never went back out there again, and was as good as he was. And I blame the fact they didn't have failings and sufferings and hardships growing up, because everyone it's all about giving people pats on the backs and telling them good job. And quite frankly, that's just hindering people. And I know I'm ranting now, but another good example of that is remember the Titans. It was a defensive player missed a coverage, and the white, talking about civil rights move in the civil rights time, stuff like that, and equal rights between blacks and whites, and the white coach gave the black player, that was the corner, who missed his coverage. He's like, "Oh, don't worry about it. You'll get it next time." And Denzel got pissed, because he's like, "Don't do that. Don't do that, because you're making him weaker. You're making him accept that as what is okay." And I thought that was a really powerful part of the movie. And there's something to be said for hardships.
And I think people kind of turn their back to hardships nowadays. They think, okay, oh, I don't want to experience this, or let's try to avoid this. Obviously, some you're going to want to avoid, but others are going to make you stronger. You're going to have to deal with it, because life is a bunch of hardships. It's unavoidable. You have to be able to deal with it, and deal with it with the right mindset. Positive mindset will have a better outcome. And most people need to take accountability and responsibility for their decisions, because basically create their life in front of them. So for people listening, every decision you make daily will have an effect on how you're going to turn out, whether it's physically or mindset. But just know, if you have that questionable decision on some things, that it can lead to a weaker mindset. And David Goggins says right off the bat, like, he wasn't born with this mindset. Like you said, he was almost 300 pounds. He found and developed this mindset over time of saying, I don't want to be a
Yeah,
slob
yeah.
anymore
And
and
I
just
think he
wasting
even says
away
that
in
he
life. He was
had to
like,
fake
what
it
am
till he
I going to
made
do to
it. He
change
he
it?
kind of had to make this like fake persona to get himself out of his comfort zone a little bit. And sometimes it's true. You got to have to kind of fake it till you make it sometimes, because it's like a practice. I mean, it's like if you've never barbell squatted before, you have to walk into the rack. Obviously, if you've done the correct prep work and progression to the barbell to the back squat, but whatever, we'll get to that later. You have to step up and pretend like you've been there for the first time, and just practice. And I think the biggest thing that David Goggins does is, he accepts that failure is not fatal, and he accepts that success is not final. He doesn't accept that once he does a 100-mile race that it's over. He looks for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And that's what makes him so great. It's just that little switch in his perspective of not accepting complacency, not getting comfortable. And yeah, he even says, again, like you said, I'm nothing special. He says, I'm the Black Forrest Gump. I just keep running. I thought it was funny.
And maybe, for him, faking it was basically him telling his mind, I'm changing who I want to be. And that's hard for your mind to do. So he looked at it as, let me fake it, kind of let me take that approach to it. But it worked for him. It's tough for people to change their mindsets real quick or on a dime. And people, I think they struggle with that, concept of, oh, how can I change my personality? I think that's a great way to do it. Fake enjoying it and get through it. But look at him now. He's completely different. And he'd probably laugh at himself if he looks back, 20 years ago at what he was. He's a whole different person.
Let's move on to the next guy, because I could talk about David Goggins for hours. So the next guy I have is Wim Hof. His nickname is the Iceman. And this guy has done so much meditation, and he's able to control his body temperature and his immune system with his mind. And real quick, if you haven't heard of him, he's completed a full marathon above the polar circle in Finland, so temperatures of like negative 20 degrees Celsius, which is negative 4 degrees Fahrenheit, in 5 hours and 25 minutes, and he did it wearing shorts, only shorts. And then he also did because it's not just about cold, it's also about heat. He ran a full marathon in the desert with no food or water, and he was able to maintain his core temperature of 98.6 the entire time. He was dehydrated of about 5 liters of water following the marathon, but he was fine. He drank some water after the marathon and had a couple beers even. He was able to submerge himself in an ice bath for an hour and 52 minutes without his core body temperature changing. So it's just fascinating stuff, the way that this guy can control physiological responses just based upon where he pushes his mind. And it's just such a profound story and profound example that the accomplishments this guy can achieve, and it just blows scientists away.
And that's the great thing, that it baffles scientists, because we don't fully know the power of the human mind. There's so many of these athletes and extreme thrill seekers that push past the barriers of what people think is, the limit. And this guy just completely surpasses most of it. And there's other stuff out there. If you look at kind of like the flow state theories, is, people get into these mindsets where, they're almost in a different world, but they can accomplish these great feats. And it's like they can shut off, fear and all these other senses that will be like, all right, body, stop, this freezing out, it's cold, it's miserable. And these people aren't fazed by it. And I think that's the amazing thing with the mind, is we're just realizing its full potential.
Oh yeah,
nowadays, and people are just
Hoff, scientists thought
the roof off of it.
Automatic nervous system couldn't be controlled by willpower. And not only has he proven them wrong, but he's done scientific studies with them. Like they're just one group of people, but with scientists, observing him and monitoring everything. And he has people that he's trained, because his ultimate goal is he wants to cure the world of diseases and sicknesses with people's minds, and he wants to teach people these techniques. So he has 12 of his trainees, and in a study they showed that these trainees, these 12 people, just lying in a bed, were able to create more adrenaline than somebody who was about to bungee jump for the first time. Um, and then these 12 participants were also injected with a bacteria that would normally make people sick for 5 to 8 hours, and the whole group was able to suppress those um, immunoresponses within 25 minutes. And I think it's just so fascinating how if you have the right discipline and consistency, you can train your mind, you can train your body to do whatever you have thought of.
Yeah, and if you can take control of your mind, and
Yeah.
people can do it a lot better than I can. I know your next example is of the monks, right? That can basically control their gamma rays of their mind, and get into such a state where scientists can't explain it. And I'll let you dive into that and kind of
Yeah,
open
I mean,
that one
I
up, because I
think
think
I
this
think a
is
big
just
thing
one of the
to
most
keep in
fascinating
mind from
things.
this episode is just that you can't accept that everything we've already known up until now is just it and is completely correct, because it's just, I don't know. The best thing I can say is every idea was said to be crazy before it was implemented. Like, I'm sure this guy Wim Hof sitting around like, I wonder if I can control my immune system and my automatic nervous system with my mind. Everyone around him was like, ha ha ha, yeah, good one, good joke. That's a crazy idea. That's never possible. No one's ever done it. It's impossible. So there's nothing wrong with the heavy glass of skepticism, because don't accept everything as correct, because there's always new things developing. But yeah, so the monks, these guys, this is fascinating, and I remember learning this at a young age too. That really directed me at a young age at where I wanted to take my life, and how we wanted to brand everything with think, fitness, life, mindset, exercise, nutrition, and basically you have two different brain signals that your body sends off, um, and one of them is gamma waves, and we don't fully understand the nature of these gamma waves. And I think Francis Crick, who was the co-discoverer of the DNA molecule, believed that the gamma waves had something to do with sort of larger networks in our brain and in our conscious awareness. And the study that was done consisted of Buddhist monks who had been meditating for anywhere from 10,000 to 50,000 hours, between 15 and 40 years. The monks were able to produce many, or such high levels of gamma waves that it was baffling scientists. They had no idea why so many gamma waves were being produced. And then, along with that is not only are they sending off a completely different level of a brain wave that is only minorly sent off by normal human beings, but they're able to control their heart rate, they're able to control their blood pressure, and they're able to control, similar to Wim Hof, um, heat, and they're able to heat different objects, and they've done different tests. You can look up monks and mindset, or electric monks, and they're able to create heat onto like a piece of paper. I forget what they do. I think they make something perspire, but it's pretty fascinating stuff.
Yeah, and I think one of the articles you sent me, the high level of gamma rays kind of, what they say, contributed to the levels you get when one experiences like love. And I thought that fascinating, because a lot of people look for this, how do I get stronger, this and that, or be tough. But at the end of the day, and we'll get into it in a little bit with Frankel, is that the power of love just creates such a strong mind, and these monks are able to achieve those levels. Now, I'm not saying they love like certain items or certain things, but they're at such a level where they're at such a peace and love for, it could be nature, society, the world, that these levels are just elevated, which I think is awesome. Because if you look at or read the Frankel book, he says that basically salvation for man is love, and that can drive such a powerful mindset and force
Yeah.
and meaning to people
Oh my
that
gosh,
it can't be
there's so
stopped.
much to talk about after what you just said. That was really well stated. And I mean, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. I mean, you just said it perfectly. The only other thing I want to say is just these monks also have a much higher blood flow to their brain, um, and one thing that goes along with these gamma rays that has been seen in high levels is, along with love, is also seizures. And completely anecdotal on my part, but I almost feel like it's like at that point the seizure is because the physical body isn't ready for where the mind's trying to take it, and it's like there's a conflicting firing going on there. And I could absolutely be 100% incorrect with this, but it just kind of reminds me of how most people can't turn their hamstrings on or keep it contracted at a certain degree of knee flexion, and when you get them into a half kneeling hamstring hold position, their hamstring starts spasming. And it's a combination of you trying to turn that muscle on while your brain's trying to turn that muscle off, and there's a big miscommunication going on between the mind and the body, and the essentially the muscles seizing. So I just feel like that has something to do with it. But
Totally.
yeah, and I think that pretty much sums it up about
Okay.
the monks. Let's talk more about Viktor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning, because I'm really happy you brought that up, because that's just another great example about powerful mindsets and the will to continue on. So yeah, go ahead.
And I want to thank you for kind of pointing me in the direction of this book, because you had mentioned this, I think, a couple of weeks ago when we talked, and I had never read it before. First off, I want to say if anyone's out there listening, this is a must read. You have to pick this book up. I feel like everyone should read this in the world, because it's just such a powerful book. And a lot of what we talked about today with the present people, a lot of the stuff is touched in this book. And quick brief, I'm not going to ruin the book for people. I want people to kind of experience the book from themselves. This guy just went through probably the ultimate suffering that anyone could go through in this world, survived World War II in the concentration camp, and then he turned around and he put all his learnings basically into the psychology of the human mind, and puts it as, what is a person's meaning in life, and how can they develop this powerful positive mindset to basically change themselves for the better. And in the book it goes over people that didn't have it and just gave up and didn't have a will to drive on. And I think it's such a powerful message that people need to have like you said, a why in their life. And then anything that comes to them, their hows,
Yeah,
it doesn't even matter.
I'll bring David Goggins back up, because he talks about how he wanted to be the baddest mother alive, and his sort of mental routine was scenes from Platoon, scenes from Rocky, and he said he was in his hell weeks. I mean, I go listen to the story, but I think he said he's like, picture him freezing cold in the rain outside, not very covered, and they're all out there, and people are quitting, ringing the bell, and he's just sitting there singing songs from Platoon to himself, because he's just holding himself to his how, or he's holding himself to his why. He's holding himself to his why the whole time, because that how is so strong and so negative that he needs to keep doing that. Viktor Frankl's story is just so fascinating. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else to add to that you didn't touch on, but I think you pretty much covered everything about him.
People need to experience it on their own. And I could get into the deep aspects of it and go over it, but it's one of those things where touch on it, let
Yeah, and
people go
I think
figure
that's
out their
one thing I just
own
want to
why
mention
for
is just
themselves after reading this book.
one of his
And
quotes
motivation.
is, when a man finds that it is his destiny to suffer,
That's fine.
he will have to accept his suffering as his task, his single and unique task. And I think that's huge, because everybody has suffering, right? everybody wants to gripe about their suffering. Everyone wants to talk about their suffering. Why? Most people want to talk about it because they want assistance or they want to vent. But some people talk about it because they think they're the only ones going through it. But what's important about this book is he talks about you'll have to acknowledge the fact that even in suffering, it's your unique and alone in the universe in your individual suffering. And this is still part of that quote from that book. And he says, no one can relieve him or her of their suffering or suffer in their place. Their unique opportunity in life lies in the way in which they bear their burden. And I love that quote.
It's just so powerful. There's so many great ones, and it basically shows, or he tells us as an individual, this is what you kind of need to do. I shouldn't say need to do, but this is kind of why you need to do it. But alone, he puts the emphasis on, you know, decision making and having a positive outlook in life. And I think that everyone listening and everyone out there should take a more positive approach in their life, and they're going to realize that when these, you know, situations comes up where it's a little bit of suffering or it's chaos in someone's life, you're still going to have a little bit more of a positive outlook, and you can change the decisions being made,
I,
and you're not going to let that kind of beat you down into a negative aspect. And that's what I see with a lot of this, especially the younger generations, is there's a lot of this didn't exceed expectations, negative outlook, negative. And it's, unfortunately, it's promoted in some of these TV shows and stuff with this negativity, and I don't like it. So if you're out there listening to this, you better have a positive outlook going forward. And if it takes you a little while to go find it, start getting into books, do some research,
I,
find
I
your why
I'm gonna
to have
disagree real
positivity in
quick,
your life.
not with the positive outlook part, because I completely agree with that. But I don't think Viktor Frankl really talks about staying positive. I think he talks about accepting that your suffering is the individual piece that is your life. And he mentions that the guards could take away anything from them. They could take away the fact that they got to go on a walk for a little bit. They took away anything that they could enjoy. They took away their clothes, their food, whatever, but they could never take away their mindset or their perspective, or their reaction. And that's what he was trying to get people to control, is like, you are in control of your reaction and your response, and they can't take that away from you. So many people would try to, so many guards would try to break these prisoners, and he just wouldn't accept being broken. He just stayed with what his why was for living. And yeah, I guess that has to do with being positive, because I guess he was staying positive with it. But I don't think he was just promoting being positive and having a thinking outlook. You know what I mean? Like, he wasn't just
Well,
sitting there thinking
I
like,
should
"Oh,
say
I'll be out of this one day. I'll be out of this
no,
one day." He was literally in the hole, like thinking,
right.
"I don't know if I'll ever get out of this, but I'm going to have faith that if I." Yeah, I think he just stuck with his faith.
Yeah, and maybe I agree, and maybe I worded it a little wrong. And I think what you just said is more accurate, because it's not just having positive. It was making the best out of the worst situation. Like he mentions, you know, when he was down on his luck, he still had the thought of his wife, and that's what basically drove him through a period of time. And for me, that'd be like a positive outlook. Like, hey, I'm seeing her right now. This is great. Nothing's gonna break this. No beating, no torture.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah,
she's
exactly.
here,
Because it was his
but not
wife that he
really
was
here.
holding on to. Which that's not a spoiler alert or anything like that. But definitely go check out that book. Yeah. Again, thank you guys for sending in the emails, Anthony, Jeff. Please keep them coming. We hope we answered them enough for you guys. But again, feel free to reach out again, and we can send in some more resources for you guys or answer your question more in depth over email. The email is thinkfitnesslife, all one word, at gmail.com.
To create a powerful mind, you have to have the attitude in life that you want to change something, because you won't be able to change what happens to you, but you can change what happens after that.
I like it. I like it.
And that's all I got.
If you fear suffering, then you're already suffering from what you fear. And we always talk about the only thing to fear is fear itself, because it causes you to be complacent and not challenge yourself and not grow. So and then the next step of that is the suffering is merely the antecedent to see what your behaviors will be to then lead you to your consequences. So know that if you're trying to get somewhere, if you have a goal in your life, which I hope everybody does who at least listens to this podcast, that you have to be willing to suffer, and you have to accept that you're going to get through that suffering, and you're not going to hide from that suffering, and you're going to tackle it head on. And yeah, that's all I got. Check out David Goggins. Check out Mark Sisson. Check out Wim Hof. And next week, we're going to go over the top 10 exercise myths, facts versus fiction. So if you guys have any questions or any myths that you want us to go over, please send them in. Again, thinkfitnesslife@gmail.com. And that's a wrap.